Hello and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else comes to mind during the course of the conversation. As always, I'm Rob, and if you like what I'm doing, consider subscribing to the channel, maybe giving this video a like, or hitting a little bell to be notified when new episodes come out. Joining me today is Nick Densmore with Great Lakes Brewery. Nick, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the brewery, and how you got into the world of beer.
Hey everybody, it's Nick from Great Lakes. I'm in the retail experiences manager at Great Lakes. Just means that I basically handle everything that goes direct to consumer. So that's our retail store tap room in Etobicoke. That's our home delivery platform. That's our retail store in the downtown location at the Brew Pub, and kind of all events in between there. So offsite events and events that we hold at both locations. So I've been at the brewery for 5, 6 years now. Um, Fun fact, before beer, I was in radio. So I worked for a radio station in Toronto for about 2, 3 years after graduating radio school. Um, the interesting fact is that there actually is a contingency of people from this radio station that are currently at Great Lakes. We kind of just brought one in behind each other when we all started moving from radio and into beer. Another like fun industry to be in that utilizes a lot of the same skills and emphasizes a lot of the same values. Community is the big one. So yeah, I've been kind of climbing the ladder ever since, and happy to be with you here today.
Awesome. So, what made you decide to leave the radio biz and go to the craft beer world?
Like I said, similar values, similar kind of mission statements for the industry. Um, I think that with radio, it fun industry to be in Toronto. Um, but when it came down to it, it was more about career growth for me. Radio is kind of a second career, so I kind of wanted to fast track. Um, I was doing a lot of on-air stuff, and then I kind of started to learn a little more about, the pecking order and the lineup to get in. And so I just kind of made the call. I honestly got poached at an event. Someone was like, "You're really awesome. You should come work in beer." And I was like, "I'll be honest with you, I've never poured a beer in my life for money." And they're like, "You'll be fine."
Awesome. Awesome. Well, today we are going to be talking about two different beers, both from Great Lakes Brewery. Fun fact: I've actually been to the brewery. I went to the Ontario Craft Beer. Um, I can't remember what it's called. Conference that was in Toronto. What 4 years ago now? 3 years ago? Before pre COVID. And
Yeah.
one of the things we did was we all hopped on the bus and came over to the brewery and had a couple beers and walked around in the production area. So yeah, I am familiar with the brewery. I am familiar with the beers. So the first one we're going to be talking about today is Octopus Wants to Fight American Style IPA. Tell me a little bit about this beer, Nick, as I crack it open.
Yeah. So Octopus Wants to Fight IPA is one of our big core beers here in Etobicoke at Great Lakes. It's a pretty tropical forward IPA. I always say that we try to make our beers as accessible as possible. When I started here, I started on the event circuit, so I was getting people to try all different kinds of beer. And I had a lot of people that are familiar with more so these lager styles that I could get over to Octo, even though they were scared of IPAs, simply because it's a pretty tropical beer. Grapefruit, mango, pineapple notes on the nose. Um, it's 6.2%, but it drinks pretty easy for that ABV.
Yeah, it definitely has a very tropical aroma to it when you bring it up to your face.
Sure.
Yeah, and I get pineapple off of it most definitely. That seems to be the most predominant aroma for me.
Hmm.
But it might be what maybe uh, some some mango or some guava mixed in there with that in the aromas. So,
Sure.
but I've got it in the proper glassware because anytime that you're talking to a brewery and you happen to have their glassware, yeah, you serve the beer in it.
That's perfect. Yeah.
It's got great color. It's not really hazy. It's, got a slight bit of haze to it, but not like your typical, like your Nipas and all that stuff where you can't see anything through it. I can actually kind of see through it. It's got looks like it's got a medium carbonation visually, seeing lots of little bubbles coming up in the glass, and it it had a head there for a moment, but it dissipates rather quickly, which is one of the things I look for when I'm looking at an IPA. I don't want I don't care for the IPAs that they have the head that sticks around for like 10 minutes. I actually wanted to start drinking the beer and not just look at the foam.
Sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I think you want a little bit of cap on your beer just to protect it from oxygen, but I get that. I get that sentiment for sure. Um, I'm lucky enough that I'm drinking a can of Octo that was actually canned today.
Wow, super fresh.
That's GLB, baby. That's what we want. Fresh is best. Fresh is best.
Yeah, so when I drink this, I get the bitterness, but it's not the very first thing you get on this, which is nice. You actually get a little bit of the sweetness is the first thing I get, and then followed almost immediately after by a hit of bitter. But it's not, and it's like it's like a pithy style bitter. Like if you were to eat the inside of like an orange, that the pith that's in an orange or a grapefruit, it's that kind of bitter. It's not that pucker your butthole kind of bitter where you're like, oh my god, what the hell did I just drink? It's good. It's the can says that it's 88 IBUs. I've always found that IBUs tend to be a little subjective. Um, it is bitter, but it's not overly bitter. It's got a good balance to it with the sweetness from the malts and the fruitiness from that you're pulling out of it with the hopping and everything like that.
Yeah, I want to start a campaign to ban IBU altogether.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
Well, I understand it served a purpose at one point, but then things got completely ridiculous with these people. Oh, it's 200 IBU, it's 150 IBU. Is it? Is it really? Or are you just trying to make people think it is?
As someone who manages a lot of people that are like entry level salespeople, I call that, for example, I encourage them to look beyond any crutches, right? And so when you are talking to someone about a beer, I always encourage them to use real words, right?
Yep.
Uh, don't lean on, well, it's an American IPA, so therefore it's this. Well, it's 88 IBU, therefore it's this. It's just you're making up you're making up noise to take up space. Tell me what you actually
Yeah.
think about the beer, right? And so I think that there's a lot of people that like don't end up experiencing certain beers because something like a high IBU count, which is subjective to begin with, scares them away, right?
Yep.
I'd rather just say this is a beer and this is what it's like, as opposed to this is an IPA and this is what it tastes like, right? So I'm just encouraging my staff to just think beyond the label, think beyond the info that's given, and actually build a perception of a product like on your own. I think it's a great
Yeah.
exercise.
And that is a great exercise. And it's funny. Uh, I'm uh, I'm a level one certified Perdome beer enthusiast, and that's the main focus of level one is the social aspect of it and being able to describe beers in real world terms. Like, oh, well, this tastes like, if something tastes like a cracker, you say it tastes like a cracker. You don't try and come up with some fancy pants way of saying it. You explain what the beer actually tastes like and what the properties of it are to you, in real world terms, so that other people who might not have any idea of what you're talking about initially get get a good picture of what the beer actually is and might decide, oh yeah, that's something I might want to actually try.
And see, when I mentioned earlier radio and beer kind of similarities, in my opinion, radio's in dire straits right now, and radio will survive on real connection, right? Like true, earnest, this is what's happening in my neighborhood style, like radio broadcast. And I think the same could be said for beer, though we're not in any trouble. uh, real good beer and real good salespeople will succeed on relating to customers and meeting them where they expect to be met, as opposed to reading the jargon, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you have right, you have to be able to explain it in terms that people are gonna understand,
Mhm.
because, there's a whole contingent of people out there who've never tried beers because they don't understand, "Well, I don't know what IBU is, and I don't know what this hop is and what this hop is," and things like that, and they get put off by people who are, who are, like, hardcore snobbery people like that are like, "It's all about this and all about this." And two, some of them are, frankly, they're scared to ask because they don't want to appear like they're dumb, or two, they don't want to seem like they don't know anything about beer, even if they don't. It's just human nature. You don't want to seem like an idiot
Mhm.
at any time. So people are scared to ask. And if you can sit down and talk to somebody and say, well, this beer, yeah, it's gonna have some bitterness in it, but you're also gonna pick up, these fruit flavors, or you might not pick up these fruit flavors, but you might get this other range of flavors. If you can give it to them in real world things, make an honest connection with them, you're gonna have a much better chance of people, one, trying your product, and two, being repeat customers.
Well, and that's the thing. So the biggest key phrase that I've learned is "I get this." Right? It's not "this is what it is." It's "I get
Right.
this, you may not."
Yep.
Because when we're talking about, where there's a big conversation, obviously, right now in the industry about inclusivity and diversity, and when you get into that, it's easy to look at the basic, like there are not enough women in this industry, there are not enough people of color. But I also look at it as there are still people that feel uncomfortable simply because they don't feel like they fit in, regardless of why that is. We need to do our best to make sure that we're presenting an environment and a dialogue that people can relate to. And what that means is simply meeting the customer where they want to be met with terminology that they're comfortable with, regardless of where
Yep.
they come from or who they are.
I agree. So in terms of Octopus here,
Mhm.
um, I would say it's got like a medium to soft body. I don't know if that's what you guys would uh, say it is. I mean, it it's got a little bit to it, and it sticks around a little bit at the end. So the finish isn't super clean. You get a lingering bit of flavor and bitterness on the finish. And the body, like I said, isn't like a crisp and clean, like your typical, like your Coors, your Molson, or your whatever's, your Buds. So yeah, and I get a little bit of like grassiness on the finish as well. I don't know if anyone else does, but my tongue might just be defective. I don't know.
Well, and it kind of gets that way with the goal for a lot of these like West Coast style, or I mean, we were labeling it American style, but I would call it a West Coast IPA. Is the real goal of those kind of styles is to have a real dry finish. So when you talk about your New England IPAs or your New England Pale Ales, those finishes are more juicy. They linger. There's a lingering sweetness to it. Where these are meant to be super dry, super thirst quenching is what you kind of tend to get out of that. Is it's a beer so dry that you just want to have another sip, right? Your mouth is dry, you need to drink more. Um, but yeah, Octo for me was like a bit of a gateway drug. So it was when I started the brewery. I'm not kidding. I had no experience in beer. Um, a friend of mine opened a brewery, and I kind of helped him build it, but I didn't have any experience on the beer side. And in 2017, when I started here, that was the first year that Octopus Wants to Fight went to the LCBO as a spring seasonal and never left. It's been there ever since. And so I kind of got to learn and grow along with this beer to the point where now Octo, many of you would know Canuck Pale Ale. Octo and Canuck are kind of like this in the LCBO. And I think it's really cool that we have a community of beer people out there purchasing at LCBOs that are buying more IPAs than they are conversationally more, acceptable pale ale. So it's just cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I have to admit my favorite beer in your regular lineup is the Canuck Pale Ale. Um, it's a good solid. I'm just looking for a beer that's got a little bit of a traditional sense to it, beer.
Mhm,
And it's a great one for that because, um, the other thing I found, circling back a little bit to people and beer, is not everyone understands that having the word pale in your beer doesn't necessarily automatically make it an IPA. A lot of people that I've met who are not initiated in beer terms automatically see pale ale and they think, oh, it's going to be completely bitter. They don't understand that pale ale literally, in the most literal sense, means any beer that's not a porter or a stout.
mhm. Yeah. Well, it's also just I think that sure. I think, well, Canuck and to some extent Octo came around at a time where there was definitely a big like bitterness race. You mentioned the IBU conversation, and I won't throw anybody under the bus, but there were beers that came out of that time that, they prided themselves on being inaccessible, and it became that like exclusive club of people who, you know, said they enjoyed, incredibly bitter beers. And I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
those people don't exist, but I'm saying that from a business perspective and from a, beer as the people's beverage perspective, like why would we make beer for, 5% when we can make beer for a beer that anyone can have, I can
Right.
I can
One that's more
confidently
accessible.
yeah, I can confidently pour a pint of Octo for someone that maybe is more used to drinking lager styles and maybe has never had an IPA before. And sure, it may not be their favorite beer, but they're probably feeling okay about having it.
Yeah. Well, and I actually fall into that category because in for me, um, the only IPA that I really enjoy is an old school English IPA.
Mhm,
I'm not a big fan of the New England style. I think New England style IPAs are IPAs for people who don't want an IPA,
mhm,
and I think West Coast IPAs for me they're just too bitter.
mhm.
And I don't enjoy having that much bitterness. I like just a punch of bitterness on the finish. I like the malt forward, malt heavy backbone that traditional English IPAs is. But having said that, if someone were to hand me this, I am not going to refuse it. It is a good beer. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not my first choice, but I would definitely not refuse it if someone said, "Hey, we've got some octopus wants to fight. That's all we got. You want one?" I'd be like, "Hell yeah, give me one."
Well, and so that's what I say too. Like, really like blessed and fortunate to be a part of the Great Lakes beer team and to be there from, the past 5 or 6 years and kind of grow with the brewery because I always tell people because I do hire a lot of entry level people that generally aren't, familiar. They were like me 5 years ago, right? Um,
Yeah.
but I just I'm so happy that we present a bit of a really fun playground where there's beer every week, 3 or 4 releases every single week. And if you are motivated to learn about styles, product, the industry, we're presenting a really great opportunity to do so. All you have to do is try the beer and be open-minded. And that plays into inclusivity as well. It's a beer lineup at either location or in either retail fridge that we craft to make sure that there's always something for everybody that walks into either of the establishments. And that's a really important thing, I think, and it often gets forgotten. It's we want your favorite beer to be on tap.
I understand, and I agree 100%. I mean, if you can provide a wide array of beers in varying degrees of styles, you're gonna hit all the check boxes for people. You're like, oh, I like this one, and this other person might be like, oh, but I like this one. Well, guess what? They're both there at the tap room, and you can have them, or they're both available in cans at the retail store, so you can have them. And that's the best way to build brand loyalty and to bring new people in, because if you get people who are like, oh, every time I've gone there they've always had something I want, they're going to bring someone along who might not necessarily know what they like in the beer world, and they might be able to find it at your place.
But it also like nobody wants to sit at the dinner table with a bunch of people that are exactly like them, right? It
Yeah.
fosters an
That's true.
environment. it fosters an environment which is contagious of people that they prefer different things, and they come from different backgrounds, and they are different people, and that energy is really cool to see. And I'm really happy that we're able to present those kind of environments to people so that they can enjoy meeting someone new or someone from a different background that doesn't necessarily like Octopus Wants to Fight. They prefer our
Right.
English mild, right?
Which is a fantastic beer.
Yeah, Monty Mild. It's a dog beer.
Yes. The other one the other one is what is it? Pompous bastard.
Papa's
Or
ass.
no, Pompous ass. That's what it is. Yeah, that one. I actually took a 6 pack of that with me to the States when I went to visit some friends, because I have a friend who likes English style ales, and I thought that, and I've called him a pompous ass several times. So I'm like, here, this is a beer that's made just for you,
Yeah,
and
it's
and he
all.
and he enjoyed it.
It's also like I'm not gonna toot the horn because I love Pompous Ass. It's also the probably the best deal in craft beer going right now at 280 a can of the LCBO. You can't
Is it
you
really
can't.
only 280 a can?
It is. Um,
Wow.
it's crazy, and that comes back once again to like the people's beverage. We really stand by that moniker of like we built our house in the 90s when it wasn't easy to be a craft brewery. We've put a lot of infrastructure into our place so we can make beer efficiently, and we're not like gouging the customer. We've we built it. We can do it and make a good margin and succeed as a brewery by making beer accessible not only from a style standpoint but from a price point. You 280 a
Yeah.
can, you're standing up against your Coors Lights of the world, right? And that's pretty
Right. I mean, I have to admit, I'm fairly fortunate. I'm one of those people. I walk into the LCBO and I don't even look at the prices on the beers. I just grab what I want. So when you said it was 280 can, I'm like, wow, that's actually really cheap, because I think most of the stuff that I tend to pick up is in the upper threes to four, maybe even $5 a can
Mhm.
sometimes. I didn't realize that when I was buying Pompous Ass, it was so damn cheap. I might have to go out and get more of it.
Look, by no means is a huge sales pitch. Like I totally understand smaller breweries coming up now. They've figured out their own pricing strategies that they can make a buck on a $4.50 can.
Yep.
No problem
Yeah.
whatsoever. Whatever you need to do to keep the
Mhm.
lights on, go for it. I'm just proud of the place that we are because we can afford to do that and we don't, right? And I think that that's pretty cool for us.
That no, that is pretty damn cool. All right, I noticed you still have half a beer left. I actually finished mine, so you wanna finish that and we'll move on to the next one, or you got another glass available?
Have another glass.
Ta-da! All right, so the next
Ta-da!
beer we're going to be talking is going to be the Great Lakes Premium Lager. I have to admit, I've only had this one a couple of times, um, but it in my recollection, it was good. I mean, a lager is a lager. If you do it right, you do it right. If you do it wrong, everybody knows.
There's nowhere to
Look at
hide.
that. Yeah, there's that. Well, that's the thing. There's no place to hide your mistakes in something like just a traditional lager. Again, you know, it's got a great color. It's completely see through. I can look through this and actually see you on the screen.
Hmm.
It's got it seems to have a little bit lighter carbonation than Octopus had in terms of the bubbles I see coming up out of the glass, but it's not too far behind. It's got a little bit of a head left. Didn't have a whole lot to begin with, but it has retained what little it did have, and it's got a nice bready aroma to it. I would say it's kind of like kind of smells like just plain old white bread. If you were to open a fresh or if you were baking a fresh loaf of white bread, that's what you get. I mean, it's got that nice bready aroma to it. Like I said, it's got the great color. It's a little washed out for me on the screen, but in person, it's like this nice deep golden color.
Yeah.
Um, and it's nice and sweet. It's got a fairly light body to it, so there's not a whole lot of lot of stuff going on in your mouth. It's just there, and you swallow it, and it's gone. It's pretty clean finish. Doesn't really linger. This is this is this is what I typically call a patio pounder. You could just kind of sit out on your deck, and you could have a 6 pack of these, and you just be drinking them and be done with them before you know it, because it's it's completely inoffensive, and it's great on a hot day. It's great on a mild day. I mean, it's a lager. I mean, people drink them year round for a reason.
Well, yeah, and it does kind of speak to, so you know our workhorses in the LCBO. It's our Canuck Pale Ale, it's our Octopus Wants to Fight. Um, but we're a bit of a brewer-led brewery, and we're probably one of the larger breweries in the craft scene in Ontario that still are brewer led. You know, we tend not to, it bites us in the ass sometimes. Tend not to rely too much on, you know, sales data. We just tend to rely on our solid brew team to, trust their gut and put out things that are, what the people want. Um,
Right.
and we really garnered a lot of momentum on this beer throughout the pandemic, and we started pushing out more lager styles. And we did that because the brewers, were really caught up in this idea that everybody's sitting at home and nobody wants to drink these all afternoon, right? You may like Octopus Wants to Fight, but we don't want you putting away 8 of them in an afternoon. We want you to enjoy a beer that you can kind of enjoy for your day.
Right.
And so we really put a lot of weight behind lagers. With that came a rebrand of what was back then, pre-COVID, our GLB Blonde Lager. We brought back the Heritage Shield logo. This was the logo that this beer first came out with in 1987 when we put it to market in literally in PET, like plastic Coke bottles in a retail store. So we really wanted to pay like homage to that heritage. It was the blue collar upstart of the whole brewery, and we really enjoyed taking it back to the old school branding. It's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, it's nice. It's crisp and clean. Um, it is. I mean, if you're looking for a gateway beer for somebody who is opposed to craft beer, something like this is the perfect. Oh, you like drinking Bud and Miller and Coors? Here, try this. This'll get them get them in the door, and they'll be like, oh yeah, this. I mean, because it's like those, but it has better flavor. It's not. I mean, and I understand that the big macro brewers, they have a scientific formula that they follow to make sure everything is completely repeatable every single time. But and you guys, not saying craft brewers don't have a formula that does that, but the scale and the procedures are just different enough that they tend to lose like some of that nuanced flavor in their beers. And those are, the macro beers are the beers. They're like, oh yeah, I just want beer. I don't want to think about it. I don't want any flavor. Whereas something like this is like, well, it's like that, only amped up. You get more of that sweetness. You get more of that biscuity flavor, more of that bready yeasty flavors, which is great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so I have a saying that I stole from, I mentioned earlier, when I was in radio, a friend of mine opened a brewery. So he was the head brewer at Block 3 Brewing in St. Jacobs, where I came from.
I
Uh,
know Block 3.
yeah, so Brian, he's since passed away, but when he was building his brewery, he had this famous saying, and because he spent time working at Wellington as a brewer, and then he partnered up with some Laurier business grads and opened Block 3. But his saying was great because I was coming down, kind of knocking on the macro guys, and he said, "Look, I'll give credit to the macro guys because if you look at it this way, macro beer, if you want to brew it with a Budweiser, say, you got to be a PhD. You have to be incredibly smart because you have to take variable ingredients and create the exact same outcome every single time. And that
Yep.
requires a lot of skill. He says, not that we're less skilled, but craft beer is about taking a variable ingredient and celebrating the differences. And that is something that really stuck with me throughout my years because at that time I had no experience. I was just some guy starting work at GLB. in the tap room. So that's something that stuck with me, and I think that that's true. I think that we should be celebrating the differences. This beer is great, but it also might not be the exact same. When I say the exact same, I mean the exact same the next time you have it, and that's
Right.
okay. Like that's actually great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's one of the things that initially drew me into the craft beer world. Uh, some I don't know, 20 some odd years ago. Um, was the fact that you might have the same beer from the same brewery, but it might not taste exactly the same because they don't. Unlike the big brewers, they don't always have access to the same exact ingredients every single time. There might be a shortage on something, and the priority goes to the big boys. So you have to try and figure something else out. And that was one of the things I was like, wow, this is great because you get different flavor profiles, but it's still the same basic beer. There's just like it's just tweaked slightly differently, or you get just a little bit of a difference in it that you didn't get before, and it might be something you're like, well, this makes it even better for me. And it's a two-edged sword because it might not last. You might you they might end up having to change the recipe again. That might be not what you remember, but that's a gamble worth taking, in my opinion.
Well, so this beer, I'll be honest with you, we're 35 years old, and this beer has changed since obviously we started making it in 1987, many ways and many times. And I'm not a brewer, I would never claim to be. Um, but what I do know about the brewers, at least the brewers here and the brewers that I've met in the industry, is that they are notoriously the most picky people I've ever met in my life. And so you may think this beer is the same, and they may be tweaking it slightly, just slightly. Every brew, slight changes, slight changes, slight changes. Um, Along the way, we had major changes. Like, for example, when we moved from Brampton in 1990, we were making this beer and packaging it in green Coke bottles. We were using malt extract to make it, and we moved it here. And the first condition was that it had to be all grain, and so that's a obviously big step, an important step in the history of a beer like this.
Yep.
But that's not to say that from 1990 to now, we haven't tweaked things because, of course, we have. The industry's changed, the ingredients have changed, the flora and fauna in the places where we get the ingredients has changed. So,
Right.
of course, beer is going to evolve with the times, and that's not to say we don't have high standards and we don't want to keep things as consistent as we can because we do, and we hope to. But you know, once again, beer comes from the earth. Beer comes from nature. So you got to expect that it's going to change a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, beer is a product of the environment. So as the climate changes, as the environment where the ingredients are grown changes, as the environment in the brewery changes, things are going to change and evolve. And you always hope it's going to be for the best, and most times it is. But there's always the occasion where it's not. But you know what? This is a fine beer. This is a beer, like I said, that if I had somebody who was like, "Oh, I'm not really big into craft beer. I'd pour this for them, let them drink it, and I can guarantee afterwards they'd be like, okay, craft beer is not bad."
I'll tell you. So we notoriously well, consistently over my time here in Etobicoke, but now with the new location coming around, we're open 363 days of the year. And so we're open on holidays. And what I will tell you is that I tell my entire team those holidays are the most critical days that you will work here because you will get the beer store crowd, you will get the LCBO crowd. And all you need to do is sample them this and tell them that it's $50 a case. And
Yep.
you can break it down to them. You can break it down to them. It's just over $2 a can. And once again, it comes back to price. It comes back to the fact that you can get a case of Great Lakes Premium Lager cheaper than you can get a case of Budweiser. And you're supporting a local economy by doing so. So I don't really see any reason why you wouldn't. And the place that sells it is open
Right.
almost every day of the year. And so it's once again built the house on the lager. The lager, we have to thank the lager for everything that we do. um, and
All praise be to the lager.
yeah, but it's also like it allows us to keep selling this lager at such a great price. Once again, 280 a tall can, uh, $50 a case. We only upped it to $50 a case. It was 48. we upped it to 50 to make the home delivery minimum of $50 when we
Right. I got it. Yeah.
when we launched the
Yeah.
online store.
So if people want to hit your online store, is it just off your main website?
Yeah, 100%.
Which is
So
what,
you can
go
find
ahead.
it on our main website, greatlakesbeer.com. You can also head directly to it at greatlakesbeershop.ca. Um, we are next day GTA. So if you're in the Greater Toronto area, I'm talking Scarborough, Mississauga, Toronto, you are getting your beer the next day as long as you order before 11:59 p.m. We also deliver to the Greater Hamilton area, so Stony Creek, Hamilton, Burlington, Oakville, um, every Saturday. So if you place your order before 11:59 on a Friday, you'll get your beer on Saturday. We're working on province-wide shipping. We've been hesitant to do so because we really do believe in the treatment of our product, and we really do believe in supporting your community. And I do get a lot of people from as far up as North York saying, "Hey Nick, why can't you ship me beer to North York? I know that Bellwood ships me beer to or not North York, sorry, North Bay. Bellwood ships me beer to
Yeah.
North Bay. Why can't you?" And I say, "Well, we can. It's just about whether like it's morally right and whether we feel confident sending our beer with a third party distributor to get it there." Um,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great breweries in North Bay that would probably appreciate, your business more than we would, right? And so
Yeah.
like we're working on it and we hear it, but the home delivery thing, I can speak to this because it was kind of the thing that I built when COVID
It,
hit. It kept
and
everybody
it's
in.
part of your job.
Well, hey, I'll tell you, the throwback story because we have half a beer left is that um, right when COVID was a thing, but it wasn't really a thing until was it Tom Hanks got it? It was Tom Hanks or Bill Murray. I always get them mixed up. It wasn't a thing until one of them got it. And so I was planning a trip to Montreal. My boss said, "Get the hell out of town. Take an extra day off this weekend." So I planned a trip to Montreal. I'm driving to Montreal and I get a call from my boss. And he says, "Nick, have you left yet?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm like halfway there. I'm just cruising." And he says, "Well, you might want to turn around." "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I don't think anything's going to be open when you get there." It's like, "What is going on? Like, what do you mean?" And he's like, "This COVID thing, it's happening." And I was like, "What?" And so I had my Airbnb booked. I had all this whole weekend planned. And he says, "Well, did you bring your laptop?" And so I was in Montreal, holed up in my Airbnb, going out to the only brewery that was open every night, but mostly in my Airbnb, building our online store, uh, figuring out our home delivery routing plans. And I came back on Monday. We went live on Tuesday with home delivery. This phone call happened on Friday. So in 3 days, we turned this whole thing around. We kept everybody employed, which was great. All of our sales
That's
reps
awesome.
became drivers. And we also built this amazing network of just being able to connect with people. I will not ever discount the value of having someone that represents the product on your doorstep because there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot
Yeah.
of impact in someone that actually starts at the brewery coming to your door and saying, "Hey, I know you haven't talked to anybody in a week. Here I am.
Right.
Here's your beer. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night." You know what I mean? Like there's a lot to that, and we're not willing to compromise on that.
Yeah, no, and there's I mean, if things are working the way they are, there's no reason for you guys to compromise on that. I mean, you know, I would appreciate getting delivery because I'm a little farther out than either the Greater Hamilton area or the Greater
Yeah,
GTA area.
100%.
Uh, but I I can always find your beers at the LCBO, and I've got 3 of those in my town, so I'm good.
Well, here's the thing, like what is it now? 7 core LCBO brands, like, and at any given time, 2 or 3 seasonals. Like we always have to like correct sometimes our like licensees, so our bar and restaurant sales team, who are like hung up on selling our like one-offs, like our limited releases. It's like, well, you have like 12 other beers you can sell that are around all the time. Like,
Right.
like, what's wrong with Canuck? Canuck is one of the best beers in the province. Sell that one.
Yeah. Right.
We
Yeah,
get
there's nothing wrong with it.
well, we get a shiny ball syndrome, right? It's like, ooh, this is new and fun. Let's get
Yep.
that. But yeah, no,
Yeah. No, yeah.
we're working
Yeah.
on
I
products.
mean, yeah, it's like I said, it's not that big a deal for me because I'm 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 not that far outside of the Hamilton area, so I get it in my LCBO, and it's always perfectly fine. I mean, I don't know what the dates are on these, because let's see. This was my great my Great Lakes Lager was packaged 10/4/2022, so that's not that bad.
You're actually only a week older than mine, so that
Yeah,
ain't bad
see.
at all. And that's the big thing. Freshness is important. We
Yep,
get people all
it
the
is.
time because we get a lot of seasonal products. So, for example, right now, Thrust
Thrust. Yeah, I
is
saw that at the LCBO the other day. Yep.
Thrust is on its way out. So you get people, oh my God, Thrust is gone. How long will it last? And I say, it's not a question of how long it will last. Like if you want to buy some, it will last. It's just a matter of like, do you really want to drink 3-month-old Thrust? Like we have plenty of other great IPAs that will come out between now and 3 months from now. Drink
Yep.
those.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's everybody's got that. If they've got a favorite, they want it out all the time, or they want to buy it in mass quantity so that they have it when they want it. But not everyone understands that not all beers hold up the same way for periods of time. Some hold up better than others, and yeah, it all comes down to do you want your beer fresh, or do you want your beer sitting around and I won't name any breweries, but there's a Toronto brewery that was releasing pumpkin ales that were over a year old this year, and
I wouldn't
and
call it Toronto. You're stretching with Toronto.
well, okay, fine. Well, for me, everything north of where I live is Toronto. So
It's also fair. If you were to say where they were from, you would almost out them. So
yeah,
I appreciate it.
so
The interesting thing in
but
that in
but
that scenario was that they doubled down on it and they said that they're oh yeah,
yeah.
we tasted it and it's great. You should buy it. And it's like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah. No, unless it's a barrel aged beer, a beer that's over a year old is not something I think I'm gonna 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 want from especially if it's an unfiltered, unpasteurized beer from a craft brewery. You know, unless you've kept it under extremely controlled conditions that entire time, it's probably gone off a bit.
Well, and a beer with considerable adjuncts is the big
Yeah.
thing there. And like I said, I'm not a brewer. I don't claim to be, but the one big thing I've learned is that the moment you put anything in that beer outside of the holy ingredients, the
Right.
Reinheitsgebot ingredients,
That's right.
um, is the moment that you enter a slippery slope of how long will this last. And
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time, a lot of money on tasting panels. We're tasting beer as it gets older through its maturation process, stored at cooler temp, stored at room temp. We begin to find out kind of where beers start, for us at least, to tip over the hill. And what I will tell you is that we have a fantastic uh, like we have a fantastic packaged product that lasts well. But even with our system for keeping things fresh, someone like myself is going to start to see degradation on a lot of our beers after a month. So,
Yeah.
like with all of our infrastructure in place and all the money we spent on keeping things fresh, that's the best you're going to get. So,
Yep.
I would encourage everybody to just look at the date code, like drink fresh is best.
Mo- Most definitely. Look at the date code on your beer.
Fresh
All
is
right, hey
best.
Nick, we were at the 45-minute mark here, and it's a little longer than I typically like to go with
Oh
my
my
shows
God.
these days. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you're sitting there talking about beer. You lose track of time. So one more time, if people want to find your beer, if they want to buy it direct and have it delivered home, how do they do that?
Well, if you live in Ontario, you can find it basically everywhere. If your local LCBO isn't carrying one of the brands that you'd expect there, one of our 7 core brands, or any given time 2 seasonals, you can always ask for it. That would do us a lot of help because we do check in on our LCBOs, but it's up to them to order. If you live in the GTA, so Mississauga, Toronto, Scarborough, I'll make sure your beer gets to you next day if you order it before 11:59 every single night, 7 days a week, 363 days a year. If you live in the greater Hamilton area, so Stony Creek, Hamilton, Oakville, Burlington, you can get it every Saturday if you order before 11:59 on Friday. Once again, it'll be me sending it to you. So you can always send me an email, nick.d, at greatlakesbeer.com. I'd love to reach out to you and connect and find out how we can get you some beer and make you smile.
Awesome, awesome, Nick, it's been fantastic having you on the show. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to sit behind a table and drink a couple beers and talk about them with me. Um, if people have any questions or comments, please leave those in the section below this video. I will be sure to forward anything on if you don't feel comfortable emailing Nick. Other than that, it's been a great show, Nick. I'm Rob from the internet. Cheers.
Cheers, Rob.